Welcome back to the show, everyone. It's DinaKalmeta here, and for today's news, I wanted to bring you some updates concerning what's happening with the United States, Iran, Israel, as well as Moscow, China, and Greenland. First, let's talk about Iran because they are turning up the volume and the stakes. In a recent report, Iranian officials are boasting that they've expanded their missile stockpile. At the same time, Iran's defense chief is vowing that the country will fight off any enemy attack. Those are not just emotional words. They are signals to Washington, to Israel, and to every U.S. base in the region. According to a new report, Iran is warning its neighbors that if the United States launches strikes, Iranian missiles could target U.S. bases on their soil. In other words, any country hosting American forces could be dragged into the conflict, whether they want it or not. And the United States seems to be taking that threat seriously. The airbase in Qatar, one of the most important U.S. facilities in the Middle East, is now quietly withdrawing personnel. On paper, this may look like a defensive move, but in practice, it tells us something. The Pentagon is preparing for blowback if a confrontation with Iran escalates. Now, in addition to that, President Trump has sent 3 missile-armed destroyers to the Middle East amid reports that a strike on the country is imminent. Now, since then, within the last couple of hours, he's walked back on that, so it seems. But what's interesting is all of this movement in the meantime. India has now advised its citizens to leave Iran. The British embassy in Iran has been temporarily closed. And then there's this headline from the Jerusalem Post. U.S. military intervention in Iran may begin within 24 hours, according to European officials. An unnamed Israeli official also said it appeared that U.S. President Donald Trump has decided to intervene, though the scope and timing remained unclear. Now, since that report, about 2 hours later, President Trump stated that we have been notified, and pretty strongly, but we'll find out what that all means. But we've been told that the killing in Iran is stopping, and it's stopped, and there's no plan for executions. Now, of course, he's being heckled for that because it looks like he's not going to make any moves with Iran. But he said so himself. We're going to watch and see what the process is. But we were given a very good statement by people that are aware of what's going on. The president on Tuesday consulted with his national security team, as I reported yesterday, in regards to military options for Iran. Now, if we look back at President Trump's past patterns, he doesn't ever say when he's going to do something. He warns. And if they don't repent, he goes in there, or sometimes he just goes in there. So right now, we really don't know what's going to happen. Oh, and we cannot forget about Israel. It's been reported that Netanyahu's plane has left Israeli airspace, and the headline reads, mysteriously. They're calling it a planned routine training exercise, denying unconfirmed reports that suggested otherwise. Now, with all of that said, Iran has closed its airspace just hours after President Trump appeared to step back from his threats against Iran. Iran's Civil Aviation Organization issued a notice to Air Missions, closing its airspace to all aircraft except permitted international arrivals or departures. Flight radar data showed very few aircraft over Iran as the order went into effect. President Trump is also getting pushback from Gulf states. They've urged the United States not to launch strikes on Iran. And Moscow has warned the United States not to strike Iran. So definitely a very tense situation. And then, of course, there's Israel. If Iran strikes Israel, or any of the U.S. bases for that matter, there will be repercussions. So time will tell. And as always, I'll continue to keep you updated. But I would like to move along and talk about what's going on with Greenland. It's being reported that President Trump is not backing down. Social media post on Wednesday, President Trump said that anything less than Greenland becoming a part of the United States would be unacceptable. The United States needs Greenland for the purpose of national security. It is vital for the Golden Dome that we are building. NATO should be leading the way for us to get it. NATO becomes far more formidable and effective with Greenland in the hands of the United States. Anything less than that is unacceptable, he said. In another post, he also said that only the U.S. could counter an alleged threat from Russia and China to the island. Now, his comments came just one day after the Greenland Prime Minister and the Danish Prime Minister portrayed a united front against President Trump's takeover threats. Speaking at a joint conference, they both said that if the self-governing Danish territory must choose between the U.S. and Denmark, they choose Denmark. It seems that Denmark and the U.S. are stuck in a fundamental disagreement over Greenland after leaders from both countries met for talks in Washington today. The Danish foreign minister said that the meeting with the vice president and the secretary of state was frank but also constructive, but admitted work was needed to find a common way forward. He said the discussions were focused on how to ensure the long-term security in Greenland, and here our perspectives continue to differ. I must say the president has made his view clear, and we have a different position. In the meantime, it's being reported that Denmark is sending military reinforcements to Greenland. According to the report, Denmark is deploying military equipment and advanced troops to the island to prepare for the possible arrival of larger forces from the Danish army and other branches of the armed forces. The Danish defense minister said on Tuesday that the Danish government is committed to establishing a more permanent and larger military presence for Denmark and its NATO allies in and around Greenland. He described the move as a clear response to the challenges facing the Arctic. Now, in addition to the Danish military, Germany is also reportedly planning to send troops to the island as part of a reconnaissance team seeking to deter potential external aggressors and protect the alliance's territory. The team will comprise of 17 members of Germany's armed forces, and they will only stay in the country for 2 days. Now, with that said, China, Russia, and Iran have begun BRICS Plus naval exercises in South African waters. This isn't just a routine drill, it's a message. We are a united global force, and we can project power far from home, right into key shipping lanes that the world depends on. So let's break down what that means for the United States, for its allies, and for the future balance of power. On a map, it may just look like a few ships and submarines moving around. But when you connect the timing and the symbolism, it becomes much more. First, the timing. These drills are happening as the world waits to see whether the United States will strike Iran. As tensions spike in the Gulf, a rival bloc of powers is displaying its ability to coordinate militarily in a completely different theater. Second, the symbolism. South Africa sits right on major maritime routes that connect the East and the West. By holding BRICS Plus exercises there, Beijing, Moscow, and Iran are sending a signal. We can work together to influence global trade and security far beyond our borders. This is about the emergence of a coalition that wants to challenge the post-World War II U.S.-led system. And then there is India. On one hand, India is a part of BRICS. On the other hand, as we just saw, India is now advising its citizens to leave Iran because of the risk of war. India is deeply tied to Western economies and at the same time increasingly central to Eastern power structures. In many ways, India is caught in the middle of a world that is dividing into two blocks. Now let's turn to Europe. Reports now say France is uneasy about German rearmament. Those words carry a lot of historical weight. Twice in the last century, a heavily armed Germany was at the center of world wars that devastated Europe. Today, as Germany increases its defense spending, old fears are resurfacing, and they're reshaping politics. In France, lawmakers have gone so far as to submit a resolution to begin the process of withdrawing from NATO. Whether that resolution passes or not, the message is clear. Some in Europe no longer want to depend on an alliance dominated by Washington. At the same time, a European Union commissioner is calling for a single European army of about 100,000 troops. The idea is simple. If the United States steps back, Europe wants its own independent military force. So you have France questioning NATO, Brussels talking about its own army, and Germany rearming. All of this points to a continent that is waking up to the possibility that the security order of the last 70 years may not last. And while all of this is happening in the background, Canada's leader, Mark Carney, is visiting China to mend economic relations, right as U.S.-China tensions remain high and tariffs are back on the table. From the Middle East to Africa to the Arctic, Every region is quietly preparing for a world in which U.S. leadership is contested and new centers of power are rising. This is exactly the kind of environment the Bible describes. When you zoom out from all of these headlines, you see a familiar pattern. Nations are arming, alliances are shifting, former friends are hedging their bets, and new coalitions are forming that would have been unthinkable a few decades ago. What we are watching today in the headlines is literally prophecy in the making. What's happening with Israel, actually, especially what's happening with Israel, she is God's prophetic time clock. What's happening with Iran, Russia, the United States, Europe, it's all a part of prophecy. Jesus told us that we'd see these things before they happened, so that when they happened, we would believe. He also told us that we would see distress of nations, wars and rumors of wars, nation rising up against nation and kingdom against kingdom. And finally, he also said that when you begin to see these things come to pass, to look up and lift up your heads, for your redemption draweth nigh. And that day is indeed fast approaching. But I'd love to hear from all of you, so please do leave your comments below. Also, when you have some time, come and visit me on my social media pages as well as my website at www.cww7news.com. All right, everybody, thank you so much for watching. And until next time, God bless and stay safe.